Hey all, I have my layout here and it's very basic with very few drop shadows. Some of the smaller elements have drop shadows and the photo has a drop shadow. But I want to show you how to make this layout more realistic, as if these letters are setting on a shelf. And it's simply in how you apply your drop shadows and change the settings for your drop shadows. And so I have here, I have my original layers of my final layout, but I've duplicated them and removed the drop shadows here so that I can show you how to do this. First, let's work with this shelf. This is actually not really a shelf element. It's more of a paper with a curled edge that I've got from Flurgs, and I'm utilizing it like a shelf. You can use anything for a shelf. You can actually have an actual shelf element if you can find one out there to buy or get for free. Or you can even get creative and just use some ribbons to get this effect for this technique. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply a high drop shadow to my paper layer that I want to act and look like a shelf. So you can see just the basic shadow does not help it look like a shelf. And the trick is to change the angle of the drop shadow. And so right here I'm going to click on the FX in the layers palette to open up my style settings, and what I'm going to do is change the angle of this drop shadow. Now, in order to, there are no exact settings that you say go to this angle or go to this distance, because it's going to be different with every layout. What you need to do is learn the concepts and think in your head what it's going to look like on your wall. When you have things on a shelf on your wall, the light source is going to be closer than our traditional scrapbook page that you can imagine is laying in our lap. Our traditional scrapbook page laying in our lap is farther from the light source, and we generally always have it coming from the upper right hand corner like this. When something is on the wall, it's more level to the light source and closer to the light source. When things are closer to the light source, they're not going to be as blurred, which would be the size, and the angle is going to be different because we're higher up on the wall. And so for this case, I want to move this drop shadow to the -90 degrees, because I want it to be as if the light is casting it straight onto the shelf. And you're going to see now it's put that drop shadow back here, and already it's beginning to look more like a shelf. But I'm going to need to increase the distance of this so that it's actually casting a shadow on the letters and the photo and things that are setting on the shelf, almost as if the light is coming down, hitting that wall there and kind of bouncing back up. If you want to play with the distance a little bit, you can do that. I'm going to increase it just a little bit and click OK. But now the bottom part of this element doesn't look realistic. It would have a drop shadow on it also, because it is some distance from the wall and the light source is more equal in height to it, and so we want it to look like it's looking straight onto it. So I'm just going to drag this layer to my new layer icon to duplicate it, or hit Control J or whatever you want to do. And I have a duplicate of it. Now on the lower one, I want to change the drop shadow this time back up so that I can get a drop shadow along the bottom edge. And I don't want it to be as high. I'm picturing in my head where the light source might be coming from. It's not directly onto this shelf, but almost equal. So the bottom is going to be more of a drop shadow like that. And so that's how you can get the drop shadow on the top and the bottom, by having the same layer duplicated and changing the angle of them. Now we need to work on these letters. Before we do that, I want to point out though that, note, my letters are on the layer below my shelf. It's important to have that so that you have this shadow casting onto the letters. Let's go ahead and take both of these and move them below the letters, and you can see there it doesn't look like it's quite as realistic. And we can look at that again after we put the drop shadows on the letters. I think did I grab them correctly? Let's close this so I can move them. And there you can see it looks a little bit more realistic. So now let's do the drop shadow on the Y, and I'm just going to add the low drop shadow because I want it to be with less of a blur. The soft edge would be if the light source is further away. And now let's hit that FX, and I'm going to once again change the angle, and I want this time it to look more 3D. But before we change that, let's change the settings so we can, the distance, so that we can see what it's doing to that letter out there. I'm going to really increase the distance, and I'm going to increase the size a little bit. Let me click OK, and I want to zoom in so you can see this letter a little bit closer. Click the settings to bring it up again, and I want it to look a little harsh. I got the blur a little too much, but I'm going to really take that distance out. But you can see it's starting to look a little more 3D, but I haven't quite got the angle right. I'm going to bring this angle up so the top of the shadow is in line with the top of this Y. And now it's beginning to look a little bit more 3D, and if it's actually setting on this shelf. And as I said, there's no real distance. Maybe you want it to look more 3D. You're going to raise the distance. If you get it too far, it looks like the shadow is not really part of the letter or the element that you're working with. This would be a great technique if you had a frame on your photo. I decided not to have a frame on my photo, but I can see having the frame on a photo really looking cool with this. And so I think I've about got that where I like it. I'm going to hit OK. Now you're going to want all of the letters most likely to have the same drop shadow. So I'm going to right click on my Y layer and choose copy layer style, and then I can click on both of the other letters while holding down my control key to select both of them at the same time. You can do this for every single thing you have on your shelf if you have a lot more on there than I do. Right click and paste layer style, and it pastes it into all of them at the same time. Now you can see I have a much more realistic, like it's a shelf layout. And I want to go back again and grab these two layers to show you, and I want you to watch out here when I bring these down, how it doesn't look as if they're setting on the shelf without having that cast on them from this drop shadow that I've got at the 90-degree angle. See, this looks much more realistic. So having them in the appropriate order is important. Now I do have the little star is actually above the shelf because I wanted it. I didn't want that shadow on it. I wanted the star to appear as if it's going on the top of the shelf. Adding elements, and the same with this string here. Adding elements, then I want to suggest above the shelf that hang down over the shelf is also going to lend to that effect of having it on a shelf in 3D. See, if I take off those two elements, the effect isn't quite as strong as having those elements where it hangs over the top of the shelf. And so you really have to think about this a little bit, and it's not that hard. It's all a matter of changing the drop shadows and having them in the right order in your layers palette. And so I look forward to seeing your layouts with your photos and or other elements on a shelf, and I'm anxious to see what you can do with it.